Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Dan Shay called Obsessed. There's a part of me that thinks that I should dislike Dan Shay a lot more than I do. Granted, it's a very silly and petty part of me, one that considers their brand of pop country painfully cheesy, kind of lightweight, the sort of overpolished fluff that I'd condemn if it was coming from Hunter Hayes or Rascal Flatts, and yet I don't condemn it. For as much as they're very easy to rip on and might as well represent the boy bandification of pop country, there's a surprising amount to like about this duo that doesn't seem to get a lot of credit. I think a major part of it is that their debut album, Where It All Began, was uniformly good without being great or having huge standout singles, mostly courtesy of some pretty basic melodies and songwriting. But there was a core to this duo that I actually quite like. For one, they actually try to harmonize and they keep their instrumentation on the organic side, and for another, the duo were the sort of songwriters able to inject enough detail to keep things a little bit more interesting than your above average bro country. More importantly, they were so sincere in writing uncool music that I was inclined to have a measure of respect for them. Despite the polish, it was authentically them. And that's when they referenced neo-traditional country artists like George Strait, I got the impression that it came from an honest place. But while their debut has held up reasonably well, I was probably a little bit too generous to it. In contrast to the onslaught of bro country that was reaching the dregs of quality in 2014, to say nothing of how bad competing pop country records like Rewind by Rascal Flatts could be, anything around that time would have been a breath of fresh air. But now that bro country is effectively gone and mainstream programmers are basically plugging the radio with anything that will keep the ears of the youth, while steadfastly ignoring promising indie acts that promise more authentic country, Dan and Shay are poised to fill the gap right now. But even with that, I like their lead-off single, and from the looks of things, Dan Shay didn't seem to be bothering with mainstream appeal. Hell, they titled their album based on a hashtag that their fans were using to describe their music. Not precisely a great sign, it did kind of smack of pandering, but again, I like the lead-off single. I had some hope for this album, so did they deliver? Well, that would depend on how you define deliver, because what we got from Obsessed is something that we don't often see. A record that is made for the fangirls and pretty much nobody else. I'll dig into this a lot more when we talk about the writing, but if Dan and Shay were less sincere, I'd swear they were tailoring the material to precisely the right frequency and make their audience swoon uncontrollably. Very much like certain boy bands, as a matter of fact. But if you're outside that teen girl demographic or you're looking for more out of Dan and Shay, do you get it? Well, that's a little bit tougher to evaluate, but I'd hesitate to call this album more than just kind of decent. Mostly because, just like Maren Morris, who I covered yesterday, there's a fair amount of missed potential here, and that's a bit of a problem. So might as well start off with that in the instrumentation and production. Now, if you've heard Where It All Began, you pretty much know exactly what to expect here in terms of mood and atmosphere. Very breezy, very lightweight, with very gentle acoustic and electric guitars, hints of pedal steel and piano, bit of banjo, and light enough percussion that the duo's vocals had the most prominence. In other words, it's a very different tone than most of what Maren Morris was trying, but unfortunately on this album, the same attitude towards heavier percussion over melody has slipped onto it. Only this time with drum machines. I feel like I'm repeating myself given how often I brought it up this week when I'm talking about pop country. When you have a record like this that relies on flow, injecting thicker, obviously fake percussion breaks apart that melody and compromises it, especially when it and the effects around it are louder than the melody itself. Now, that doesn't always happen here. On tracks like the repurposed Lanny Antebellum track All Nighter, How Not To, and Sway, the production is a lot better balanced. That's when we get the more country tracks like From the Ground Up with its much more lush instrumentation, or the more bare bones piano accented Already Ready that I frankly liked a lot more when it was called Late to the Party by Casey Musgraves, but I digress. But the issue that I find with the more pop country leaning songs is that while they are decent, they don't quite take the step to true greatness with a killer melody or an instrumental digression on the hook. And in comparison with the sandy cracks and pop of the percussion on Road Trippin' and especially Around the Clock, I get the feeling that the pop instrumentation and experimentation wasn't really doing this duo any favors. Now, you see a little bit more experimentation on Lately in the title track, to arguably mixed results. In the first case, letting the pedal steel fill up the background and really feeling too fragmented to come together melodically. The title track is trying for something a little bit more romantic and soulful, and it is a bit better, but it's why the horns feel a little bit out of place. Don't get me wrong, they sound great, but I'm not quite certain they match the low-key, tightly woven vocal harmonies. It, along with a fair few songs on this album, could have afforded to be a little bit more low-key, and they might have stuck the landing a little more for me. In fact, I'm a little bit baffled why Dan and Shay did not push in this direction. Given how much they have a built-in audience thanks to their fans, they could have pressed towards more country instrumentation or more experimentation altogether, and they probably would have gotten away with it. They have that flexibility. Hell, it's not like they don't do that as singers. Now, for the most part, I tend to be on board with Dan and Shay as vocalists. They convey a lot of heartfelt sincerity and earnest passion, and moments where they harmonize are easy high points on this record. But while I will say Shane Mooney can flow better than your average pop country artist, or even bro country artist, or even a few hip-hop acts I know, when he moves towards that fast-paced R&B vocal style and Already Ready, I'm hesitant about how well it works. On a technical level, in pop R&B, it kind of comes together, but it comes across a little bit too slick for me. I'm not sure how well it flatters them or fits with their image. That's always been my issue when they move more towards a rapping delivery. It's not bad, but not anything I really care for them doing. It doesn't really fit with who they are. But of course, this album is not for me, and for my expectations, it's for the fans, and that takes us straight to the lyrics and themes. In the latter category, kind of simple. The majority of these tracks are fairly straightforward love songs presented in ways to show that you, the audience, are gorgeous and Dan and Shay is head over heels in love with you. Hell, the premise of Lately is that he's been so busy with touring and traveling to tell you that he loves you that he spends the song trying to make up for lost time. There's only 2 songs that even attempt to inject any drama here. The first being How Not To, where he's trying to move on from you and yet somehow winds up back at your place in the middle of the night and falls into your arms and then hates himself in the morning. And given how brightly the song is framed in the instrumentation, it's a weird sort of track. If he got dumped, the romantic framing is all sorts of questionable, but if he dumped her, just get back together already. There's no good reason to be apart here. Lipstick actually handles things a fair bit better, taking a third-person picture of the girl trying to move on from heartbreak with new dates, hoping to find that spark so she doesn't have to go through the motions. But placed in the context of this album, it feels an awful lot like when Ed Sheeran released the A-Team, and it's clearly intended for fans to project upon. And this only is my big issue with this album, because by all accounts, it effectively does exactly what it's designed to do, and yet it frequently feels right on the line of fangirl pandering because the language doesn't really get specific, even with less country references to flesh out the scenes. Now, I don't want to hold this against the duo too much, after all, it's practically most boy bands' mission statement, but what does bug me a little bit here is the lack of drama. There's no stakes to any of these tracks, nothing to ground the romance and realism with the exception of From the Ground Up, which is the best song here, which means it can all feel a little bit flimsy the more you think about it, especially if you're on the outside looking in. And for our final nitpick, the choice to use the word obsessed in the title track makes it feel like it's just over the line for me. Play the song in minor chords and go a shade darker and everything will take a very different connotation. But look, on some level, it's pointless to dissect this album any further or really criticize it, again, because the record effectively does what it's designed to do, and that is to make fans swoon. And I can't be too cynical about it either, because Dan and Shay are good enough performers and bring real sincerity to all these love songs, and they don't feel phoned in or exploitative. But at the same time, between inconsistent pop country production and some really flimsy songwriting, I can't see myself liking this album as much as I liked Where It All Began, which was at least ground itself a little bit better and was willing to go into more melancholic territory and take more chances in the writing. So for me, I'm thinking a very light 6 out of 10, but if you're a fan of Dan and Shay, I heartily recommend this. Otherwise, there's better pop country that came out recently from Jennifer Nettles, but there was also worse stuff too, so I guess you can try it. Take it as you will. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got the poll up here, so all you hardcore Dan and Shay fans, you can tell me how wrong I am. But otherwise, what do you guys think of this album? Do you think it managed to come together? Does all that fangirl pandering really manage to work for you? Or did you not even consider it pandering at all? Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.